family. So we started yesterday talking about your healing circle, right? Your community of people that you have with you to support you through this journey of divorce, right? And just because they were with you during the marriage doesn't mean that they're going to be with you during the divorce process or even thereafter. And so today, I really just want to go deep into family, right? We'll talk about friends and other tribe members and things like that a couple of days. But family specifically can hold such a hold on you emotionally, right? I mean, you've grown up with these people, you share the same morals and the same values of these people, you have the same what I like to say rules, right? BS rules that I got that from someone else, Vishen at Mind Valley. And basically, what that means is you grow up with a set of beliefs, right? That your family and your sisters, brothers, cousins, aunts, whomever grew up teaching you, and they also believe, right? So in some cultures, actually, divorce is looked at as taboo, and really, I mean, it's just looked at like that, period, in society. Yes, it's becoming a little bit more normalized, but it still holds a stain with that, right? Or it's just something that's just not necessarily something that people aspire to do, right? No one wants to get a divorce. Divorce is still looked at as something that's not necessarily something you should do, right? And especially more so in different cultures. I speak with some, well, I'm not gonna get into that, but I speak with certain cultures where just even the mention of divorce in the family brings the family into chaos, right? And they feel as if they take that step into what they know is right for them, their family is going to cast them out, right? They're not going to have that same family relationship and dynamic as they grew up, just used to, right? And especially when they were in the marriage, in the marriage relationship. So for me personally, when I was going through my divorce, my family was heavily involved. I'm going to say, one, in the decision of my marriage, and secondly, in just the overall day-to-day, aspects of my marriage. And what happened is they became to be as vested in my marriage as I was. And again, yes, a lot happens in over 20 years, right? I was with my ex-husband for um, about that time period, and relationships grow. I completely understand that, right? And babies are born, and nieces and nephews, and just relationships and bonds are formed in that time that's outside of you and your husband, right? However, when it comes down to the union between yourself and your husband and the decision to continue that union, it has to be about you two, right? We spoke about kids yesterday. Yes, kids definitely are something that you have to think about, the kids that you two have together. But first and foremost, you got to think about what is for the best mental, emotional health for the two people whose name is on the marriage certificate, right? And going to your family and trying to explain that, especially when they have their own set of intentions or bonds or relationship with your spouse, could be really, really difficult. And I speak with women who didn't divorce because of the relationship and the pressure that they were getting from their parents, from their aunts and uncles, just from their family unit, or the ones that did go through with it and they lost that connection with their family. Just in my own journey, I had to break off, relationships with the people that were extremely close, to me. I grew up with my mom and my two sisters. And during my divorce process, maybe it was that they just didn't understand, the situation and the decision that I was making. Maybe they didn't trust the fact that I knew what was best for my life. Maybe it was the fact that they were so vested in the relationship that they didn't want their life, to change any. Um, it could be for a number of reasons, but I know that I got to a certain point where I said I cannot continue to put my family's needs, wants, desires, and hopes in front of me because, or in front of mine, because it was literally killing me emotionally, right? I knew I had a vision of a future that didn't involve me staying in this marriage, right? Um, Now, I say all the time, I am not a fan of divorce. I actually love the unity of marriage. I love what marriage stands for. However, I am a supporter in you first and foremost, making sure that you're living up to the gifts, the callings, the dreams that you have for your life. And if anybody is in the way of that, that means it is time, me personally, it means that it is time to transition the relationship. Okay, so with that said, I don't want it to seem like I am pushing people to get a divorce. Absolutely not. But what I am encouraging people to do is make sure that they are living their best life possible, whether in a marriage or without, or outside of a marriage. But because my audience is divorced women, I'm speaking, or either women who are going through a divorce, I'm speaking to y'all, okay? So when you're going through this divorce process, you are trying to hold on and look for any kind of, connection and relationship that you can get your hands on, right? That you can keep close. Your most intimate relationship at this point is dissolving. It's going away. It's scary, right? And especially for, the women who have been in this relationship for 15 years plus, your identity is so wrapped up in, you know, your marriage and this person, your livelihood, your day-to-day lifestyle has, you've been a part, of this person's day-to-day life for 15, 20 years, right? Or sometimes longer. So it's so natural to look outside, of your marriage and say, okay, this one is ending. Where else can I go and get some consistency as far as relationship wise? Who can I go to? Who's going to be in my corner? The next best thing is your family, right? And especially if you've been close with them throughout the duration of your marriage. But I'm just saying, caution with that. Don't expect them to understand where you're coming from. Don't expect them to be as supportive as you desired or hoped that they would be. Um, don't expect them to not take sides, Now, I'm not saying that all of those things are right or wrong. What I am saying is don't get your hopes and your emotions so wrapped up into the expectation of how someone else is going to react that it causes you to change your opinion on what you need to do for your life or sends you in an emotional spiral. Okay. So I hear a lot of stories about women who had to not only fight with, their spouse during this process, but also had, to fight their mothers. They had to fight, their fathers because they didn't understand the decision that they were making for their life, right? My own mom, our relationship is fractured, to say the least, because of the decisions that I made for my life, right? And so it took us a long time to get back to the point where we could actually have a conversation, right? About really anything, because at some point you have to be able to separate. I think I spoke about that yesterday as far as you got to do what's best for you. And at this point, the only thought in your mind needs to be, how do I get myself to the next point, right? How do I get myself to the next goal, the next stage of my journey to become the most healthiest person that I can be. I don't have time, honestly, or energy to worry about other people's emotions that is outside of this marriage. I'm not talking about your babies, right? I'm not talking about the kids that you have. I'm talking about outside of your immediate family. And with her, she was extremely, her meaning my mother, was extremely vested in my marriage, and really came across as though it was, my fault for everything, right? And, I got to the point where I said, I'm not even going to explain it, because when I told you once what it was and you didn't listen, and you decided to give me your opinion and your take on what the problem was, um, and, kind of point fingers and things of that sort, that was my cue to say, okay, it's not time, right? This is not a relationship that I can look to for support. So therefore, what I need to do is separate myself from this person. It doesn't matter that it's my mother. Yes, would I have loved her to be there in my corner? Absolutely. But you have to understand, and I had to understand and come to the realization that people, no matter if it's your mom, your sister, your aunts, uncles, I said aunts, but cousins, they have their own set of emotional traumas or emotional experiences, even experiences with relationships. So they're coming from a place of what they know. And so if they're only coming from a place of their own hurts or their own wounds or their own negative experiences, how can they show up for you in the right way, right? So sometimes you have to look past what they're saying and look to the heart of that. And if you're in a place, at any time, maybe the divorce is past, right? Or maybe you're fine within the divorce process and you can withstand the conversation, the criticism, the deep dive into why they feel the way that they feel about your relationship. If you are at that point, which 9 times out of 10, typically you're not at that point when you're in the midst of the divorce, and usually even some time after that. But let's say that you are. If you are at the point where you can really, go in deep and understand why they're saying the things that they're saying, why they're reacting the way that they're reacting, you know, then there may be some room for, a conversation to try to reconcile or to understand, or to get to some sort of cohesion, right? So that you guys can continue the relationship. But more times than not, during this process, you cannot be held responsible or take on the responsibility for someone else's feelings in your family. Remember, most family members have deep rooted belief systems, right? About you, about your marriage, about just the rules of marriage in general, right? Whether it good, whether it bad, right? That may not be a good fit for you. And this may not be the time for you to fight that battle of um, changing their mindset, right? On your marriage, the thought of marriage, the thought of divorce, the status of the relationship, all of that. It's not the time if you are not emotionally equipped for that. Please, y'all, don't try to fight any more battles than what's absolutely necessary, right? It will push you further away from your healing, right? It will continue to keep you on an emotional roller coaster when you are healthy and whole, right? Enough to where you can have those conversations, go back and, rekindle those relationships if need be. Family is a very important relationship. Absolutely. However, the first and most important relationship is with self. And if you can't help you, you can't help anybody else. Like they say, you got to put on your face mask and your oxygen mask first before you try to put on the person who's sitting next to you, right? Likewise with divorce. Focus on you. If your family isn't there to support you, people will come in your life that will support you. Trust and believe that. I know it may be scary because you're feeling like you're going through this thing alone, but the people will show up. Pay attention to the signs. Okay? Let me see. Is there anything else that I wanted to talk about or touch on about family before I let you go? I think there was something, but I can't remember what it is. What was it? Hmm. Maybe I should start taking notes. I like to just talk freely, on this. I actually love doing these lives because, like I said, it's usually my journal time. And so as I'm writing and I'm sitting and I'm talking about different topics, it's just stuff that comes to mind, and I get to just take it from paper to talk to you guys about it, right? So anyhow, if you do have any questions or any comments that you would like to make or say anything at all, please just go ahead and DM me like you guys have been doing. If you do want more information about the free and clear after divorce method, go ahead and DM me the words details, and I'll go ahead and get that right over to you. Okay. So I don't know what it was I wanted to mention, but I'm sure it will come up soon. Maybe tomorrow or something. I will go back, backtrack on that if it comes up. I'm going to believe that I said what I needed to say, and if anything didn't get said, it wasn't supposed to get said, right? So trust the energy, right? All right. Well, you guys have an awesome, awesome day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Love and light.